Greetings, urban farmers, gardeners, and healthy food visionaries. Farmer Greg here, and welcome to the 520th episode of the Urban Farm Podcast, where every day we work together to educate and inspire you to become part of your food revolution. Have you ever pondered why you do what you do? Well, I have for over 4 decades. And I do all of this because I believe the most important thing that we can be doing right now is learning where our food comes from and how to grow our own. Our food structure in this country is in crisis. It delivers food that is unhealthy and is a delivery system that is tenuous at best. Over the decades, I've seen the extraordinary impact that small groups of people can have on the global food consciousness community. And I need your help. If you find value in the Urban Farm Podcast, please consider joining the Urban Farm Patron community to support the work we do. In exchange for subscribing, you will receive content and bonuses far beyond the free podcast episodes that we deliver. Plus, I am committed to making sure the value you receive goes far beyond what you contribute. Visit urbanfarmpodcast.org to see what you receive when you join us in revolutionizing our food system. Please consider supporting our work. It might be the most important thing you ever do. Today on our podcast, we have someone who encourages youth in his community to bloom through off-grid farming on vacant lots. We're talking with Quilen Blackwell about urban flower farms. Quielen's background in renewable energy and community organizing is well suited in his role as president of Southside Blooms, where they serve over 70 youth a week at 4 sites in Chicago and 1 site in Detroit. Southside Blooms has the mission using sustainability to alleviate inner city poverty through scalable social enterprise programs that convert vacant city lots into off-grid flower farms. How cool is that? Quielen's organizing credentials include work abroad as a volunteer in the Peace Corps, organizing rural farmers in Thailand, all the way to helping working class residents of suburban Milwaukee attain affordable housing. He later worked in the biofuels industry where he procured feedstock such as used cooking oil and soybean oil for biodiesel production. Quilen holds a bachelor's degree with comprehensive honors from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a master's degree in environmental policy from the University of Denver. Welcome to the show today, Quilen. Are you ready to rock flowers?
Yes, I am, Greg. Let's get to chatting.
Awesome. So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path you took to get where you're at today?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, so, I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin. I didn't really grow up with a passion for agriculture or anything. Madison's, typical Midwestern city. And, when I went to UW, I was actually, I was a history major. So really, my first experience with agriculture wasn't until I was in the Peace Corps. I was in Thailand, in northern Thailand near Chiang Mai. And, my project was actually to help organize a co-op of Thai farmers to help them sell their organic fertilizer. So that was really my first foray into agriculture. Later, when I moved to Chicago, because I came to Chicago to go to ministry school, and I was tutoring at a high school as part of my, ministry internship in the south side of Chicago in the inner city, this neighborhood called Inglewood. And, that was my first opportunity really to get acclimated with a lot of the inner city issues, get to really hear the stories of a lot of the teens and their families, and then, of course, one of the first things that really struck me was seeing a lot of the urban blight.
Yeah.
The vacant buildings, the potholes, the vacant lots. So, we decided to start Eco House as a response to that. And we looked at it as an opportunity to really, for me personally, to blend my, background in community organizing as well as sustainability. And, really just through some trial and error initially, we land on urban ag as just really being the most viable way to really try to create jobs and extend sustainable industry in the inner city. At first, we had more of a conventional approach to urban agriculture. We worked with the school. We had a, conventional school garden. We're growing out raised beds. But, our goal was really to try to find something that would make sense from a production standpoint. So, that's how we eventually end up landing on flowers and, building the program that we have today.
I was going to ask you why flowers and not food, but then as you were sharing, it occurred to me that flowers are a real high-end product.
That is Precisely right. Yeah. So, this is a question I get commonly. And, even like when we were first starting in the community, like this is like some of the blowback we would get. Because, people say like, why are you focusing on flowers? You can't eat a flower. Obviously we're in communities that have a lot of food deserts. So it seemed very counterintuitive on the surface. But, when you kind of look at it from an economic lens, a lot of the dynamics within the flower industry are actually very favorable for the inner city and for particularly a place like Chicago. About 80% of the flowers that are, used in the United States are actually imports, with about 2/3 of that coming from Central and South America. When you look at, so it creates like a huge opportunity for domestic production, obviously. And then when you're talking about like a city like Chicago is one of the biggest markets in the United States in terms of consumption of flowers. When you think about, hotels and restaurants and, weddings and events and, all these different things that, are, that require flowers, but we kind of, don't think about it as regularly as we think about food. So, that's the reason why we decided to really focus on flowers, just because it made sense financially. The other thing that a lot of people don't consider with flowers is that you're not necessarily beholden to the same USDA regulations, right? So, like if we were to try to do a commercial, so if we were to try to do a commercial food farm, we would have to make sure we have food safety handling guidelines. We need to make sure we have like wash sinks and a lot of this additional infrastructure that would obviously drive up the cost of our operation and drive down our bottom line. Whereas since with flowers, you're not eating flowers, you don't have to worry about, someone getting sick as a result of consuming it. So, we can just grow stuff that's straight in the ground. Therefore our infrastructure costs are a lot lower. It costs us about, $5,000 to $6,000 to set up off-grid flower farm on a vacant lot. And then the final point in terms of why we decided to focus on flowers is that like when you're in a city like Chicago, a lot of the vacant lots aren't heritable. And what I mean by that is like, you have a lot of heavy metals like lead and arsenic and other things that are toxins, that you have to worry about if you're, growing food. But with flowers, that's not an issue at all, So it just makes a lot of sense, on both the supply side, because like, as you alluded to, it is a high dollar item. It's basically a luxury product if you stop and think about it. And, on the production side, costs are way, way lower.
I have to say, when I first found you online and started looking at what you were doing, I thought it would make a great interview. And I really had a pause moment where it was like, flowers? And I have to say, this is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant for all of the reasons you just outlined. So congratulations, man.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. Definitely took a lot of hard work and it was a team effort.
Yeah. Well, it always is a team effort. That's how we do our best work. But just putting it in order the way that you did it to make an impact in the communities, that's absolutely brilliant. I just want to thank you for that.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
So what inspired you to start Southside Blooms?
Yeah, so, EcoHouse is a nonprofit, and, the purpose of the nonprofit is really workforce development, right? So we're trying to bring in sustainable industry. We're trying to convert these vacant lots into these flower farms, and we're investing a lot in terms of, providing training for a lot of the at-risk youth and young adults that we're working with. But, because we're in the market, we wanted to set up a flower shop because, you were producing all these flowers. It's cool that the kids are really learning these skills. It's cool that we're remediating blight. But there's also an opportunity for a lot of our youth and young adults to, really be able to learn the floral side of it and, learn like flower arranging, how to make centerpieces, how to make bouquets, and everything else that you would see at a florist. So Southside Blooms was set up with the explicit purpose of being the market-facing side of EcoHouse, where we can sell direct to consumer. Because before when we were just doing our flowers under EcoHouse, we would wholesale the flowers, but obviously, we're getting pennies on the dollar when we wholesale our flowers versus, when we sell direct to consumer. So it's just a way to really extend our reach into the market.
I want to jump in here though, because you're working with at-risk youth, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
So you're really giving them an opportunity to go through the entire process from growing the flowers to harvesting the flowers to processing the flowers into bouquets and stuff, and then interfacing with the public.
Yes, that's 100% right.
That's brilliant. Good job.
Full disclosure, I live on the South Side. I live in the communities that we work in, and that's very important to me. I would say the biggest difference when you live in a community that is experiencing a lot of stress versus when you live somewhere else and maybe you come in and do some good work for you. At the end of the day, when 5 o'clock hits, you get to go back home, is that, you feel that same pressure yourself, right? Because, when midnight hits in Inglewood on a, warm July day and, there's gunshots ringing on the block, like my family's just as much at risk as any other family on the block, right?
Right.
Bullets don't discriminate. So, it lights a different fire under your butt when, you're in the frying pan yourself. So, for us, this is really about how can we really get a lot of these teens out of gangs, off the streets, and into productive, viable careers, not just a job, not just, hey, you can work at McDonald's, you can work at Target. Like, no, this is a flower industry. How can we basically take you from where, you start off as a farmhand to where maybe one day, you're one of the top floral designers in the country, like there's that kind of opportunity here. And, when you really start looking at just how dynamic and robust the flower industry is from top to bottom, because like you alluded to, it's not just about growing flowers. There's a flower design, there's the event planning, like everything that's involved, in the whole flower experience. We want our kids to have a hand in, so that just creates more job opportunities and career opportunities in the community. It's also very important to us that our neighborhood that we're working in is really the foundation for the flower industry that we're developing here. Because, that's the other thing too, is like, a lot of times people do these job programs and the implicit message that we send to our kids is that, hey, if you want to be a success, you have to leave your home neighborhood, right?
Right.
You have to go downtown. You have to go to the north side. You need to go somewhere better, but the reality is not everybody can do that. And, the other reality is not everybody wants to do that. Like, just like you or anyone else, people love to be home,
Right.
I mean, there's no perfect neighborhood, you know what I mean? So, yes, to an outsider, you may look at a place like the South Side of Chicago and be like, yeah, of course, you'd want to escape there. But to like a lot of people who live here, this is home. This is where their family is. This is where their friends are. This is, where they made many memories. Like, they want to stay here. You know what I'm saying? So, for us, we want to really try to, work from the inside out instead of trying to like extract people from their home communities and try to put them into a different context.
Once again, high five, man. Walk me into one of your flower gardens. What am I going to see? What am I going to be interacting with? What's that look like?
Yeah, so you pull up on the block. It's a residential block. So let's say you come to our farm here in Inglewood, you would see beautiful gray stone homes with like these big beautiful trees, and you'll walk in. The fence is painted red. We have some artwork on the back of this farm that the kids have done. You'll walk in, you'll see like 7 flower beds with zinnias, sunflowers, bachelor buttons, all sorts of different flowers growing. You walk through, through our little field of flowers in the farm. You'll see a nice shed, with artwork, the kids' names and different designs that they've painted. You look on top of the shed, you'll see 3 solar panels. That's where we, produce our on-site power.
Nice.
You'll look to the right, and you'll see about 10 IBC totes that are collecting rainwater from the neighbors' downspouts. So that's where we get our rainwater collection. You look underneath the flowers, and you'll see our irrigation lines, and our irrigation lines are connected to an electric pump that's tied to those totes. And then what's powering the pump is obviously the power from the solar that's, connected into the shed. So yeah, it's a fantastic experience, particularly if you were to come in like late summer, early fall. Oh, and then of course I can't forget our bees. You'll see like 5 beehives, if you were to look to your left. So, we do have like honey production as well, because, when you have flowers, bees go hand in hand. They're great for pollination, which is, good for our flowers. And then, it helps them to, make nice, tasty honey, which we will begin selling next year. That's when we're going to have our first batch of honey ready for market. So yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful experience. The other thing too you got to think about is, flowers also attract pollinators. So, you'll see a lot of butterflies, you'll see hummingbirds, you'll see moths. Like, there's a lot of life on the Eco House flower farm, when it's in full bloom.
Right.
And, the funny thing is, like, when a lot of people come on our farms, they don't feel like they're in the city. They don't feel like they're on the south side of Chicago. Like, people often remark, wow, I feel like I'm in the country. Like, I see all these different bugs and insects and grasshoppers. I hear crickets, and a lot of our students who come and who work on the farms, like a lot of them, come from like very difficult backgrounds. We do work with like gang affiliated youth or returning citizens and ex-offenders, and they'll say like there's like a calming effect that they feel when they're working on the farm or they're working with the flowers. So there's also sort of a healing and natural therapeutic process that a lot of our participants experience. We can't take credit for that. That's just sort of Mother Nature doing what she does best.
Right.
So it is really a heaven on earth kind of experience. I mean, I feel very lucky because, this is my job. So I get to be out there in the summer. I'm not in a cubicle just sort of, staring, at a blank wall or staring at my computer. So I'm enjoying this. Like I'm out there. I'm like, interacting with the kids. I'm out there, helping out planting seeds and harvesting. So yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, if you're ever in Chicago, I would highly encourage you to come and, check it out yourself.
Yeah. Wow. So I have to apologize. I've interrupted you a few times, but it's just because I'm so excited about what you're doing. This is good job. I'm one of the reasons I do this podcast is because I get to interview really cool people doing really cool stuff. And man, you are one of them.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, we're definitely trying to do our part out here,
Yeah. One of the big reasons I suspect you're doing this is to impact youth and have them have a different pathway than what was maybe prescribed with their life or the area that they live in.
Totally. Right.
Tell me about, I'm sure there's one or two young people that have come along and the experience they had reflected back to you. It's like Quilen saying, oh my gosh, yes, this is the reason I do what I do. Tell me about one of those.
So there's one young man, he's 19, his name's Kobe. Back when he was like 16, 17 years old, who was shot, I think like 12 or 13 times. He was in a gang, grew up in a very dysfunctional setting. I mean, he's from Inglewood, on track to basically be a statistic, right? Like he was on track to basically be dead or in jail. But like after that experience, he barely survives and he realizes like, wow, I could have been dead. I need to do something different with my life. He ends up bumping into, one of our community partners, this lady named Sally Hazelgrove, who runs an after-school boxing gym in the community. And, he really started getting connected there, and she like really helped him to, like really create a family environment around him, like help him just sort of bring some stability to his life. And, like he was like doing the boxing gym for a couple years. And, Sally was like, well, hey, you've kind of been here for a while. It's good that you sort of are getting a little more social stability, but, you're not a kid anymore. You're 18, 19 years old. And it's time for you to start thinking about that next step and how we're going to be able to transition you into the real world. So, let me have you talk to my friend Quilen, who runs this thing called Eco House in the neighborhood. So, he came, he did an internship with us this past summer, and he absolutely loved it. I mean, it's, one of the things that kind of what you're saying in terms of, really providing a different track. A lot of people don't really associate, gangbangers and flowers, right? So,
right.
When we'll have donors come or volunteer groups come and they see someone like Kobe, working on the farm and working with flowers, because it's a very delicate business when you're, you have to clip the flowers a certain way, you have to dip them in water, right? So it helps to like soften the image and it helps to humanize Kobe to outsiders, which really helps people to begin to interact with him, as a 19-year-old versus like looking at him as this hardened criminal. He's got like tattoos and that kind of thing. But, so he does this internship with us. And at first he really wasn't sure like what it's going to be about. He knows nothing about farming. He knows nothing about regenerative ag or sustainability. All he's looking for is just a chance. He's looking for an opportunity, and long and behold, he ends up loving it. Like he ends up loving the diversity of work. He loves being outside, and he says that like it helps him to like he can breathe again. Helps him to clear his mind. And, he successfully completed his internship, and we actually hired him on as staff this fall. So now he's like, working as a production assistant on our flower farms. And, now he's like at a point where, he's like working 20 hours a week. He's, making decent money. Our staff makes like $15 an hour. So he's making decent money for him. I mean, stable, it's a stable job. And now he's able to start thinking about bigger things. Like I just had a conversation with him a couple weeks ago because, a lot of these kids, like they've never really had to deal with money before. So, started having a conversation with them about, personal finance and, financial planning. And I was like, hey, what are you doing with this money? He's just like, well, I'm just saving it right now. Well, I was like, well, hey, let's talk about like, some of the things you can do. Like, let's talk about how we can build your credit. Maybe you could buy yourself a property here in the next, 3 to 5 years in the neighborhood. Because, properties here are relatively affordable compared to like other parts of the city. Let's talk about, how we can get yourself a car that's reliable. He has like a baby girl, and, like transporting her is going to be very important. So now like all these other options are opening up to him. And one of the things he said to me after that conversation was like, wow, Quilen, no one's ever talked to me like this. Like no one's ever talked to me, from the perspective that, I have something that of value to offer. I have a future to protect. I have, a reason to like wake up in the morning and to like, strategize with the resources that I'm making and, to plan for the, to have a better future for my daughter. And that's the kind of thing that keeps me going, of course there's a lot of, difficult days, and building this thing out hasn't been easy and still isn't easy. But when I see people like Kobe who come through the program and you see literally a death to life story, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And I really think like that's the potential that, regenerative agriculture and sustainability as a movement really has, not just for people in Chicago, but, oppressed peoples all across the world, because it is a new and emerging field that is just, it's just continuing to gain steam year after year. More people are waking up to the fact that, we need to grow things that are closer, grow things that are better quality, that's free of chemicals and fertilizers, that's not degrading our soil, so people like Kobe, in my opinion, should be like some of the first people to really benefit from that. And they are starting to benefit from that because, let's just be honest, like someone like Kobe, he's going to be a little more desperate. So he's going to be willing to take an opportunity like, come into Eco House and work on our flower farm and really run with it because he doesn't have any other option. Because the flip side of this is, I teach part-time at Wheaton College. So I work with these college students who come from very, elite and affluent backgrounds. And when they come on the farm, they're helpful, they're nice and professional, but they basically been given everything and every chance to succeed in life from day one. They have a million options. So, for them, this is like, oh, this is a nice little thing, but, I got like 10 other things that are, more viable. So I'm not going to take a chance on like regenerative ag. You see what I'm saying? So, I really do think that I encourage your listeners to really look at regenerative agriculture and trying to do it in places where there's a lot of poverty, where there's a lot of suffering, where there's a lot of hurt. Because, it may, on the surface look like there's not a lot of opportunity there, but those people are going to be the ones who are going to really like grab hold to these ideals and run with it, and really make not only a name for themselves and make their lives better, but they're going to extend our work to really try to displace conventional ag over time.
Wow. And how, when something like this happens with a young person, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel like fantastic. I don't want to get emotional here, but,
why not?
I
Please do, man. This is the reason that we do what we do, to make an impact for people. And it's emotional when you impact a young man like that.
The reason why it really resonates with me is because, I personally don't, like, I didn't grow up in the hood, right? I grew up in a very affluent, setting myself. Like, I had a very Bill Cosby kind of background growing up in Madison. And, the only reason I even came here and really dedicated myself to this is because, I'm a Christian and, for me, my faith was very important. I really felt like God was really telling me, hey, I care about these people. I need you here. And, I didn't want to do it, and there's like many times along the road where I wanted to quit. And, I wasn't thinking about the Kobe's. I wasn't thinking about like a lot of the, young men and women that we're working with today. And, being in this for, the last, 5-6 years, I look back and I think to myself, man, well, what if I did quit? What would have happened to Kobe? What would have happened to like a lot of these people that we're working with? What would have happened to the neighborhoods that we're currently, building our farms? And it's kind of a scary thought, you know what I mean? Sometimes when we, do something where we have like a passion, because everyone has a passion or a dream to do something. But then, a lot of times for most of us, we let, the cares of the world to really suppress it. Like, oh, it's not realistic. It's not practical. No one's going to believe you. Like, whatever sort of negative talk track that you have in your head, like that's what we'll tell ourselves to convince ourselves not to take action, right? But we never think like, well, wait a minute, our dream isn't just about us. It's not just for us, but it's connected to someone who's a perfect stranger right now, right? And, you don't really realize just how impactful that dream is until you take that action and you stick with it and you don't quit. And then one day you meet someone like Kobe who affirms that choice, and then like you just keep meeting future people and you see like what they end up doing and how they basically take that dream that you had and then they turn it into their own dream and then they make what you were dreaming even better, and then over time it just becomes, almost a movement. Like I would never have thought that we would have had, 4 farms in the city and, be in 2 different cities in like 5 years. Like when we were first getting started, we're just trying to, figure out how we're going to get that first vacant lot.
Right.
So yeah, it's been quite the journey, and it's been, surreal at times in terms of how I feel. It's almost like an inexplicable emotion. It keeps me going, and it just makes me feel like I made the right choice to live here and to dedicate myself to, Eco House.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. You stepped into a community and you've started putting in these flower farms. How has the community accepted or worked with your projects?
So, like I was saying before, at first there was like a lot of skepticism, that flowers was really the way to go. But I would say what really won the hearts of the community is, really reaching the kids. Kids, like they would come, they took a chance on us. They don't know any better. There's kids, there's looking for something to do. And, they were having a really good time, really doing a lot of different farm activities in our after school program. And that really was what began to like soften the hearts of their parents, because they sort of saw Eco House and Southside Blooms as a safe place, for their kids to be able to participate, in after school activity, which when you live in a very dangerous neighborhood is a very important thing if you're a parent, right?
Right.
And then they sort of saw just like, the genuine passion that me and my wife Hannah had for the kids. So I would say like it first started just like at that basic human level where they're like, wow, you really care about my kids. You're creating a safe space for them. They're having fun. So I'm willing to take a chance on you. And then from there, they started to see some of the, more of the economic success, right? So, they started seeing, different tour groups coming in. They started seeing us like build out our farms and make it a little bit, bigger and better. And then, of course, we get to a point where, we start bringing the teenagers and they're being paid to work. Now, everybody loves it, right? Because now they see this as like, oh, this isn't just this fun little safe after school program for my kids, but it's jobs. It's a real career opportunity. You're bringing industry onto my block. Like, this is really awesome, right? So, yeah, like now we have a lot of community participation. Like people really love to work with us. We work with churches, schools, after school programs. We've also like built like little pocket parks on our farms with like stages where, groups in the community come and do like spoken word contests and rap battles and, little, concerts. We've incorporated art on our farm. So we've had like, community artists come in and, do different like art designs with the kids and that kind of thing. So it's really turned, more, it's more than just a farm now, right? Like it's really become a community space, and we really, used our farm as a platform to allow people to come and do placemaking activities and to really foster a lot of local community interaction.
Nice. And I'm gonna shift just a little bit on you, and let's talk about your farming model that allows you to grow at scale.
So I think the tough nut that most urban farms have, had a tough time cracking is, okay, I'm able to get a plot of land, which is already a very difficult chore. If you've ever tried to acquire land in a city, it can be a nightmare. So you get this plot of land, you're able to build a farm, but you can't get beyond that, right? Maybe your most successful farms are lucky if they have like 2 sites, but for the most part, there's really no urban farm that has a model that makes it very easy to get to scale. Because the thing is, like when you're in a place like Detroit or Chicago, there are thousands of acres that are available, but the problem is it's interwoven with the built environment, right? So,
Right.
It's like you got several buildings and maybe you have like 3 or 4 vacant lots, and, just that pattern just kind of repeats itself. So what we did, to really try to innovate around that, this is where like getting off grid is very, very important to us because, we're like, hey, what would it really take for us to be able to grow at scale and to be able to do it quickly and affordably, right? And we're like, okay, in order to do this, we're going to need to eliminate 2 things, our water bill and our electric bill. Because, when we were like looking at other urban farm models, those are the 2 things that we were seeing that was, causing farms to, really slow their growth and not being able to replicate as fast, because like they'll build this nice farm, it's beautiful, they're growing microgreens, whatever else the case may be, but, they're tied to the grid and, they're dependent on the local utility company to supply them power. Or, and they also need to get their water from the city, and you need to install, water on site, and all this is like additional expenses, right? And then when you're running that water, because, when you're running a commercial farm, like those are your two biggest ongoing operating costs outside labor is generally your power and your water.
Yes.
So, now you just created this very top heavy, farming model. But with our model, we were able to like take that away and flip it on its head. Because we're like, well, instead of looking at the city of Chicago providing us our water and, the local utility here in Chicago is ComEd. So, instead of looking at ComEd to supply us with our power, what if we just partnered with Mother Nature? Because, Mother
Nice.
Nature is already supplying us, Mother Nature is already supplying us with water. And, instead of looking at these buildings in the built environment as an obstacle, like what if they're actually an asset? And we could basically use that surface area on the roof to get us the water that we need instead of like having to run a tap, right? And we're able to, use our shed and put some solar panels on there and collect the freely available, sun power that's being produced every day from Mother Nature. It doesn't cost us anything, right? So, once we figured that part out, now we can grow and it's no problem. Like, we can build a new farm in less than a week. You know what I'm saying? So for us, it's just more being tied to like the resources that we have on hand and like being able to like build enough customer demand to justify our growth. But our model isn't top heavy like most urban farm models. So we now have a model that can conceivably be at scale and take advantage of the thousands of acres available in the urban environment and do it profitably.
Wow. Cool. How cool is that? So where do you see Southside Blooms going in the next, say, 5 years?
Kind of in this phase where we're really looking at expansion. So the last few years was really just trying to get the kinks out of the model, really trying to like prove the concept. And now we're sort of, turning that corner where it's really time to let the world know that we're here. I mean, that's why we want to do this podcast, because we really want to let people know like, hey, Southside Blooms is here. We're ready to take your business, and help support a really good thing. Next year, we're going to formally launch our flower shop. Our website is up, www.southsideblooms.com. You can basically get your pre-orders in today if you're looking for flowers for Mother's Day. We're looking to build out 3 new farms in 3 different neighborhoods next year in Chicago. We're looking to expand our footprint in Detroit next year. And then like beyond that, we really would like to keep riding the flower wave and, really try to become one of the biggest, if not the biggest, flower grower and supplier in the United States. So 5 years from now, we would love to be in a situation where we're in 3 or 4 cities. We have hundreds of farms across those cities, and we at least have like 5 to 10% market share of the flower business, in the United States.
Wow, that's a big goal. I love that.
Yep, we're very ambitious people.
Nice.
You got to be a little crazy sometimes.
Oh, yes.
You're dreaming big,
Yeah, exactly. People, I created myself to be the person on the planet responsible for transforming our global food system about 30 years ago. And that's
really?
Yeah, well, that's a pretty hefty goal in life. Who knows how far I'll get, but it's what gets me up every morning. And it's like, why not? If we can dream small or dream big, why not dream big?
Right. Yeah, and I kind of feel that same way too, because it's like, okay, you may, like they say, you shoot for the stars and you land on the moon, but hey, at least you're off planet Earth. You know
right,
what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's like our mentality, because like I think like part of I know it seems like a very big goal, even like the goal you're talking about, and I think we have like very similar goals, to be quite frank, because we do want to get into food at some point, but I think we look at our work as being a multi-generational job, right?
Yes.
So I look at like my role as to really sort of get that do the heavy lifting, get the ball rolling, sort of show people a viable way of like approaching it. And then maybe the next generation comes and they're like, okay, let's build upon that, take that momentum. And then, they're the ones who maybe actually, reach the mountaintop. So, and that's why I feel like when you look at historical social change movements, like it's usually been several generations, right? Like it's very rare where, when you're trying to change the world, that's all done within one lifetime. So not to get too morbid here, but, we do definitely look at the next generation, the generation after that. Hopefully they'll sort of carry out what we're starting today.
Yeah. Amen to that. That's, that's truly planting seeds for the future. And I love the quote, the gentleman that started the Land Institute, I think that's where, Wes Jackson, he says, if you're not planning out 50 years, you're not thinking big enough.
Right, exactly. Right. So, yeah, that's 100% true. It's funny because like, when I was in college at UW, I had a professor who really changed my paradigm in terms of the way I looked at my life. Because, before I was kind of like your typical college student, just kind of like living year to year and thinking like, oh, get my degree, get a job, get married, et cetera, but my professor, he asked me, like, hey, Quilen, like when, you're on your deathbed, like, what do you want to have accomplished? Like, what do you want your life to mean? And I never really thought about, my life, like from like living it from like the end forward. I was kind of just was like living it, from the front to the end. Right. And I was like, I just kind of like grasped for some straws. I'm like 20 years old or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it'd be kind of cool if I'm able to like retire early or, be able to like, have my kids go to like, nice colleges or whatever. And then he said like something I'll never forget. He was like, Quilen, whatever you decide to dedicate yourself, whatever goal you set for yourself, if you can accomplish it within your lifetime, that goal is too small. And that like totally changed the way I viewed my entire life.
Right. Yeah.
And that's like why I'm approaching Southside Blooms the way I do, because it's like, you know what? I want to try to like have my life be dedicated to a goal that's so big, it's going to take multiple lifetimes to achieve it. And I just want to play my part. Like that's what gives me meaning. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. How cool is that? Once again, I'm loving what you're doing there. Thank you so much for that. So
totally.
I'm going to shift on you, and I'd like for you to talk about a time you failed, how you overcame that failure, and what you might have learned from it.
Yeah, so I failed several times. I love talking about failure because, like a lot of times, when you're in a situation, where people see some success, a lot of times we want to curate the story and like, whitewash, all the bad things that happen. But that's not true, right? So, for me, firstly, I've had 8 or 9 businesses fail before I started EcoHouse. And I was struggling. Because like I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just didn't really know like what was like that right formula. And like there's like one business in particular that like I had these high hopes for. I was like in the medical supplies industry that I was trying to do because, I had a friend, it seemed like he had some, opportunities in medical supplies industry. I didn't really know anything about it, but we could maybe make some money. So I was like, okay, let's try to do this. And, at first we had some, initial success. So I'm thinking like, okay, like, this is going to be it. I'm going to be able to quit my day job. I'm going to be able to focus on this. And, like the entire thing ends up belly flopping. And, like for me, it created a little bit of identity crisis because, kind of like really caused me to, look at my life and, look at myself and be like, hey, do I really have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? Like I've been trying to do this. Like at that point, that's probably like my 8th business that failed. And I'm like, okay, maybe this just ain't for me. Maybe, someone like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and these other successful entrepreneurs, maybe they know the secret sauce and I just don't know it. And I was particularly disappointed with that business failure because I really tried. Like I was like reading like a lot of those self-help books and, trying to like, read like biographies of, Warren Buffett and trying to like learn and think like, how other successful entrepreneurs think and, reading books like Good to Great, like, all those business, the traditional business books out there, I was reading them and it still didn't work. Right. So, like I was basically ready to just like give up altogether. And, really like the only thing that kind of like forced me to pick myself up was, well, number one, I didn't know what I would do, like what else I would do. So I was like, okay, well, this thing blew up, but I don't really have anywhere else to go. So let me just kind of, sit here for a while and lick my wounds. And that actually ended up being like the best thing for me because it really gave me time to, reflect and do a lot of introspection. And that probably lasted like a good 6 months. And it was like really through that time, I was able to really clarify, my personal values, what I really wanted to dedicate my life to. I had to be honest with myself. I mean, I think like that's a real hard thing too when you go through a failure is like I had to really be honest and like say like, hey, you know what? I was really just trying to chase money. Like, so let me stop chasing money and let me try to chase like a real problem and just focus on solving something that's going to add real value to people. And if I don't make money, whatever, like I'll just let the money figure itself out over time. But basically just sort of trusting the fact that if I keep doing, the right thing, the right way, at some point it's going to break. And that wasn't easy. You know what I mean? Because like a lot of times as an entrepreneur, people are telling you like, hey, if you're not making money in the first 6 months, get out, right? Like it's a waste of your time. Because I didn't make my first like paycheck from EcoHouse until like year 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, it was very, very difficult and very lean times. But, now when I look back on it and now that I got like more, sort of I'm a little more ag literate, I kind of look at failure a lot differently. I kind of look at it as like cover cropping. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Because like, when you plant like a cover crop, from a natural perspective, you could just kind of look at it and be like, oh, you just plant this crop and then it died. And that's that. Like it failed, right? But no, like the the point of a cover crop is that it's intentionally going to die, so then it can make the soil more fertile for your cash crop, right?
Yep.
And in retrospect, like I looked at those 8 or 9 business failures as basically 8 or 9, cover crops that, yeah, they all failed and they all died, but then it made, the soil within myself a lot more fertile so that the cash crop of Southside Blooms could grow from there. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
And, that made me like look at it totally differently because, in the moment, I'm like looking at each individual failure and I'm like, taking it as, oh, wow, I can't do this. Like I'm doing something wrong. But, now I look back on it, I'm like, you know what? Thank God for those failures because I won't be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't through all those struggles I had to go through.
Exactly. Exactly. Good job, man. What do you consider your biggest success?
Well, I think my biggest success is, basically what I just described with like Kobe. I mean, whenever I see, a Kobe of the world, like one of our students really turn their life around in a very tangible and concrete way and do like that, 180, that's what's, to me, like that's what it's about. Like at the end of the day, you can win awards, you can get grants, you can make sales, and that's all good because that's all the fuel that's, driving the fire and driving the engine, so to speak. But, it's really about changing lives, for me. And, I think like whenever I see that and I see like, sort of those eyes, light up, especially in a kid who previously thought their life was worthless and now they have meaning and they have value. And not only do they have value, but now they're all about regenerative agriculture and sustainability because they're not looking at it as like necessarily quote unquote good policy. They're looking at this as like, hey, this is what saved my life. So they're going to like fight a lot differently than someone who's just doing this, because it's their own scientific or interest or it's just a hobby. So yes, like definitely with each kid who comes through and whose life has changed, that's how I define success. Wow.
And that probably clicks into what drives you as well.
Yeah, totally. Yep. Same thing. They're one and the same, like that's, what's keeping me going. And yeah, I mean, I know it sounds a little redundant and a little simple, but to me, it really matters because I look at a lot of these kids and I just look at myself and I'm like, hey, you know what? I could have easily been them. So, And if I were them, I would have wished that someone who was in my position would have taken the opportunities, the blessings that they had in life and, use it to try to just give me a chance and give me an opportunity. And, so it's like humbling. So like every time someone like Kobe does really well and they, really sort of have that light bulb go off and they end up doing these really cool things, through our work, then yeah, like it makes me feel like I'm like, living up to like what says in Matthew, too much is given, much is expected. And I feel like, hey, you know what? I've been given a lot. So there's these great expectations. And, I feel like those expectations are being fulfilled every time another life, another human being, is able to get an opportunity and they run with it.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. And if you could recommend one book for our listeners, what would it be and why?
The book I would want to recommend is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It's not a conventional recommendation, but for those who aren't familiar with Sun Tzu, he was like this Chinese general, like, a few thousand years ago. And then he basically wrote this book that is essentially about, strategy and battle and wars and the affairs of the state. And it's been a highly, highly influential book for, over the millennia. It's used in business and politics, obviously in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And, the reason why I recommend it is because I think for a lot of people who care about regenerative ag and sustainability, a lot of times we don't necessarily think about what we're doing as being part of, sort of a larger war and sort of engaged in warfare. But I can guarantee you people in conventional ag would look at us and see us as a threat. Right. So I think like if your listeners were to read one book, I would recommend this book. And I think like, if more of us in the regenerative ag movement would, start thinking more militaristically, and I don't mean that in terms of like engaging in violence. I mean like that strategic thinking, that it would really help to, lift the industry and lift the movement as a field together and, help accelerate a lot of the work that we're doing.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome. And what one final piece of advice do you have for our listeners?
I'm going to keep it very simple. Don't quit. There's a lot of things you can do. I mean, dream big and, like keep learning and that kind of thing. But, at the end of the day, I think the thing I've seen, what separates the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, is people who quit and people who don't quit. So if I was your listeners and you're really encouraged by regenerative agriculture, very passionate about it, just don't give up. I don't care how insurmountable the circumstances may appear. I don't care like how many Popeye chicken sandwiches are selling. Don't care. Like, do not quit. Stay in the battle. Stay on the front lines and things will get better because we're doing the right thing. People are starting to take notice of it. Regenerative ag is solving way more problems than just creating healthier food systems, which of course is very important. But even like in, sharing my story, like that's part of what I want your listeners to see too, is that regenerative ag is solving a lot of social problems. It's helping to close historical gaps within racism and gender inequality and, all these other things that people don't necessarily connect to regenerative agriculture. But at the end of the day, someone like Kobe is able to have the opportunities that he's having and create the life that he's creating for himself because of regenerative agriculture. So don't forget about that and don't quit.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Quilen.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Greg.
And how can our listeners find you and find out more information about you?
Yeah, so you can go to www.southsideblooms.com. That's our florist website. You can also send us an email, info@southsideblooms.com, or you could give us a call. Our phone number is 773-358-4227.
Nice. And as you said earlier, if you want to get your flower order in for Mother's Day next year, you can do that on their website.
Yep, that's 100% correct.
Excellent. Southsideblooms.com. You can also find show notes from today's podcast at urbanfarm.org/Southside Blooms. Hey, if you've enjoyed this podcast and are interested in listening to my first podcast series, Freshly Green from 2007, you can subscribe to support the Urban Farm Podcast. With that, you will have access to Freshly Green and so much more bonus content. Visit urbanfarmpodcast.org to find out more and to pledge your support.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.